Now, uh, just for to improve the performance, the distributed shared memory used to rely on replicating of the shared data items, and there are always concurrent accesses through the many nodes. And these concurrent accesses may include reading process or the writing operations. So it is necessary for the distributed shared memory to maintain the coherence among the shared data items. And so we are in requirement of a mechanism that is going to control as well as synchronize the accesses which is done by the different nodes. So it is also necessary to understand that how this concurrent updates uh, towards the shared memory will be carried out. And for that, we have many consistency models. The different models which are related with the memory consistency is the strict consistency model, in which whenever a node is going to have a read operation, the value which is returned by a read operation for a particular memory address is always the same value as written by the most recent write operation to that particular address, irrespective of the location of the processes performing the read or the write operation. In sequential consistency model, all the processes are going to see the same order of all the memory access operations on the shared memory. The third model is causal consistency model, in which all processes is going to see only those memory reference operations in the correct order or in the same order that are potentially causally related. In pipeline RAM consistency model, this model is going to ensure that all the write operations which are being performed by a single process are being seen by all other processes in the order in which they are performed, as if all the write operation performed by a single process in the form of a pipeline. The processor consistency model ensures that all the write operations performed on the same memory location are seen by all processes in the same order. And the weak consistency model is basically is going to enforce the group of memory reference operations rather than on the individual memory reference operations. So today we are going to discuss about the release consistency model. Uh, as we have seen that in the weak consistency model, that entire shared memory is being synchronized whenever any process is going to access the synchronization variable. And whenever there is a memory synchronization, we have following two operations which will be performed while doing the synchronization of the memory. The first one is that all changes made to the memory by the process are propagated to other nodes. And all changes made to the memory by other processes are propagated from other nodes to the processes node. Now, if we look to these two operations, and whenever we go through these two operations are really not necessary, is not necessary to occur at the same time, because the first operation, which is this one, the all changes made by to the memory, the first operation need only be performed only when the process exits from its critical section, and the second operation need only be performed when the process enters into the critical section. Now there is a difference. The first is being performed when the process is going to exit from the critical section, and the second one is going to be processed when the process is going to enter into the critical section. And in case of weak consistency model, A single synchronization variable are being used, and the system will be able to know, will not be able to know it is that whether the process is accessing a synchronization variable, is entering into the critical section, or it is exiting from the critical section. So the first and the second operation which are being performed on every access to the synchronization variable by a process, which is not required, because it can be better understood that whenever it is going to, any process is going to access the synchronization variable, it must indicate that whether it is going into the critical section or it is exiting from the critical section. And that is why for getting better performance, this model, release consistency model, was came into the picture. Now this release consistency model is going to provide a mechanism which clearly is going to tell to the distributed shared system whether the process is entering into the critical section or it is exiting from the critical section. And on the basis of that, the system is going to decide and perform only the first operation or the second operation. And these two operations will be performed only when the synchronization variable is being accessed by that particular process. Now, to achieve this, uh, uh, instead of using one synchronization variable, which is used to be accessed by the process, we will be using two uh, synchronization variables. The first one is acquire, and the second one is the release. Now, acquire is used by a process to tell the system that it is about to enter into the critical section, so that the system performs only the second operation, and whenever this variable is being accessed. On the other hand, the release synchronization variable is used by a process to tell the system that it is just going to exit from the critical section, so that the system will be performing only the first operation when the synchronization variable is being accessed. Now, it is the duty of the programmer to put this acquire or the release at a suitable place in their particular program, so that whether the first operation has to be performed or the second operation has to be performed, it can be decided. Now, this release consistency can also be realized by using a synchronization variable, a synchronization mechanism, which is based on barrier instead of the critical section. Now, this barrier is going to define the end of the phase of the execution of a group of concurrently executing processes. All the processes of a particular group must complete their execution up to the barrier before any process is allowed to proceed with its execution after the barrier. So when a process of a group encounters a barrier during its execution, it is being blocked until all the processes which is present in that particular group is going to complete their execution up to the barrier. And when the last process completes its execution up to the barrier, all shared variables are synchronized and all processes resume with their execution. So you can say that acquire is the departure from a barrier and release is the completion of the execution of the last process up to a particular barrier. Now, this barrier can be implemented by using a centralized barrier server. So whenever a barrier is being created, it is given a count of a number of the process that must be waiting on it before they can be released. So each process which is available in that particular group, which is concurrently executing processes, is going to send a message to the barrier server. When it arrives at a barrier, then blocks, the barrier is going to block until the reply is being received from the barrier server. Barrier server does not send any reply until all the processes in the group have arrived at the barrier. So if it is so, if any distributed system is going to support this release consistency model. It is these are the requirement which has to be followed. That all accesses to acquire and release synchronization variable obeys the processor consistency semantics. All previous acquire performed by a process must be completed successfully before the process is allowed to perform the data access operation on the memory. And all the previous data access operation performed by a process must be completed successfully before a release access done by the process is going to be allowed. Now, the variation, this is the release consistency model. Later on, there was some modification which has been made on the release consistency model to make it the performance of this release consistency model to improve the performance. And that release consistency model is called lazy release consistency model. It is efficient from the conventional release consistency model, because what happens in the conventional approach, when a process does a release access, the content of all the modified memory location at the process's node are sent to all other nodes. All other nodes which have the copy of the same memory location in their local cache. But in case of lazy approach, in the lazy consistency model, the modification are not sent to the other nodes at the time of the release. Rather, these modifications are being sent to the other nodes at the time of the release. Whenever there will be release, then only it will be sent. So it means rather modification is to be displayed or visible to all the processes immediately after the acquire. It is based on the demand basis. So when a process does an acquire access, all modification of other nodes are acquired by the process node, and therefore the modification that were to be sent to that particular node at the time of release access will be received by that particular node only after it is accessing the acquire synchronization variable. So it is going to give better performance because less traffic on the network is going to be generated, until unless there is an acquire access which is being initiated by a certain process. So this is all about the release consistency model. Now, the coherence protocol. As we know that there are in case of distributed shared memory system, concurrent accesses are allowed. And to provide this concurrent accesses, the distributed shared memory make use of the data replication, where the copies of the data are maintained at the different nodes. And it is copied to the different nodes which are trying to access that particular data. But we have some fundamental problem of the data replication, because all the copies which are available at the different node should be up to date. It should not be stale. It should not be old. So we are in need of certain rules and regulation called protocol to keep all these replicas which are available at the different node coherent. And we have two methods by which we can do it. The first one is Write-Invalidate protocol, and second one is Write-Update protocol. In case of Write-Invalidate, in this particular scheme, all the copies of a certain set of data, all the copies which are available of a certain set of data which are available at the different nodes are invalidated before a write operation is performed on it, except one node. So before the write operation is going to be performed, the node which wants to have a write operation, it is fetching that data, taking it up to its node and invalidating rest of the data, which the rest of the data which are available at the different nodes. So therefore, when a write fault occurs at a particular node, its fault handler is going to copy the access block from one of the block to its own node, invalidate all the other copies of the block by sending a invalidate message, and that invalidate message also contains the block address to the node having a copy of the block, and then it is going to change the access of the local copy of the block from read to write and return to the faulty instructions. And after returning, this particular node is now going to own that particular block and is going to proceed with the write operation and other read and write operation until the block ownership is released to some other node. So you can say that in this particular method, after invalidation of the blocks, only one node is able to perform the write operation on that block which it holds, modifies it. So the purpose of Write-Invalidate protocol is to invalidate the rest of the data blocks present at the different node, take that data block at its own node, do the proceeding of writing process, modifying the process, and it is the only node which is called the own node of that particular block, and the information in the form of an invalidate message is also sent to the rest of the nodes. So whenever those nodes, other processes will be in requirement of the data block which is being modified and present at a particular node, should know the address of that memory location. So this protocol is known as Write-Invalidate protocol. The illustration of this Write-Invalidate protocol is being seen. Suppose this is a client node and these three nodes are already having a data blocks. So this client node is going to give the request of the block, and this block is replicated to this client node, and then it sends a message, third message, which is going to invalidate the same block which it has received to this, and this. So by this it is invalidating, and after this block is available, it will do its write operation, whatever is available, and through this invalidate block message, it will be also giving the message that the current location of the data block is available with this particular node. Now, the second one is the Write-Update protocol. In this protocol, in this scheme, write operation is carried out by updating all the copies of the data on which the write is being performed. At the same time, whenever it is being modified at a particular node, it is being replicated to all other nodes which is already having the one of the copy of that particular data block. So whenever there is a write fault which is occurring at a particular node, the fault handler is going to copy the access block from one of the block's current node to its own node, as this one. And it is going to then update the copies of the block by performing the write operations on the local copy of the block and sending the address of the modified memory location to its new value of its node having a copy of the block. And then it returns the faulty instruction. Now the write operation completes only after all the copies of the block have been successfully updated. And after a write operation is going to complete, all the nodes that have a copy of that particular block before the write also have to valid copy of the block after the write. Write होने के पहले जिसके पास invalid copies थी, that will become the valid one, because the updated or the modified copy of the block is replicated to the rest of the nodes. So in this particular method, in the Write-Update protocol, the sequential consistency can be achieved by using a mechanism which is called totally order of the write operation of all the nodes so that the processes are going to agree on the order of the writes. And just to maintain the order of the writes, the method which is being implemented is the global sequencer. Which a global sequencer is a kind of a process which is going to sequence the write operation to the all different nodes. So whatever intended modification of each write operation is first sent to the sequencer, and the sequencer is going to assign the sequence number to the modification, and then it is going to multicast this modification with the sequence number to the rest of the nodes, to those nodes which are already having a replica of the data block where the modified block has to be copied. So the write operations are processed at each node in a sequence order. Suppose this particular client node has made 3 modifications, and all the 3 modification has been given in the form of a information to the sequencer. So the first modification will be given first sequence number 1, then sequence number 2, and then sequence number 3. And then whenever it is going to receive, it is going to broadcast the modification along with the sequence number. So suppose there may be possibility that due to network latency, due to communication failure, it may be possible that the data blocks which is received by these 3 are not going to receive the messages in the form of a sequence. Suppose only 1 modification and 3rd modification has been received by this, and it is missing 2. So every time this node is going to verify that what sequence number it has received. If it has received 1 and it has received 3, but it has not received 2, so it will ask to the sequencer to retransmit the sequence number 2, which is being modified by this client. And it will not store, it will not modify the 3rd sequence before it is going to modify, we receive the sequence number 2 in the form of a modification. So in this way, the write-update protocol used to work. Now we have a certain difference in between write-invalidate and the write-update protocol, because write-update approach seems to be a little bit expensive, because it requires, every time it requires the accessing of the network, because every time it is going to do the write operation whenever updated copies of updated copies are being modified, updated copies of the modified block has to be sent to the different nodes. But in case of write-invalidate approach, updates are only propagated when it is required by the node, whenever it is in the form of a request mode, whenever it is asking, whenever it wants to read. And so the several updates can take place at the particular node which has the permission to write, modify the data blocks. And that is why most of the distributed shared memory system uses write-invalidate protocol. And the basic idea, the basic approach to implement the write-invalidate protocol is to associate a term called status tag with each block. The status tag is going to indicate that whether the block is a valid block, whether it is shared, whether it is read-only, whether it is a writable or not. And with this status information, read and write requests are being carried out. So this is the comparison of the write-invalidate protocol and the write-update protocol.